Yeah, I am super passionate about, you know, like you, therapists doing their own work, but I'm very passionate about exploring creativity. And really do think creativity can look like a lot of different things. I think of creativity as like really just authentic expression, exploring desires, and just that level of like body trust of like there's something in me that wants to do this thing or take this trip or explore this class and what it can awaken inside of us.
Hello! Thanks for coming to Conversations with a Wounded Healer. Lane and I are so happy to have you here, aren't we, Lane?
Yes, we are.
And we are in Chicago where the sun is shining today. And I have to tell you, I got this disco skeleton, not even a skull, disco skeleton. He's 3 feet tall. His name is Gerald. I saw him on Facebook Marketplace and I couldn't resist. And then I found out his name was Gerald. The woman that gave him to me, I paid for him. But she was like, "Yeah, his name is Gerald." And I was like, Gerald is going to be so happy in my house. I can't even tell you. And I put him in my window where all my plants are. And so I've got sunlight like streaming across my ceiling. It brings me so much joy.
Oh my gosh, and you said he was disco bald?
Yeah, he's a
Wow,
disco ball. Yeah, it's
I love
so
that.
amazing. Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Mhm.
yeah. So, I interviewed Shawn Hondorp, and I'm curious, Lane, if there's anything that stood out for you about our conversation.
Yeah, this was another killer episode. I loved it with Sean, and yeah, I think there were a lot of, interesting moments, in the episode. The concept of sort of like creativity came
Mhm.
up and allowing or people's relationship with creativity. And Sean talks about it from sort of a IFS or family systems perspective, which I thought was really interesting, and how like certain parts of ourselves can sort of be at odds with our creativity or shut down our creativity for a
Mhm.
variety of different reasons. And something that you brought up in the episode was that practicing creativity and getting more comfortable with it actually makes you less controllable. I really enjoyed the conversation. I know you guys talked about it on an individual scale, but I come from a little bit of a more global background. I was an anthropology major, and so I think
See,
about
this is
things.
why I wanted to have you here. Yeah, yeah, say more. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I tend to think about things on larger scales or system wide scales. So I was thinking about how creativity often shows up um, in resistance and those sorts of settings. It's not just an individual thing.
Yeah, 100%. And it's funny that you bring that lens into it because as I was listening to the episode, one thing that I wanted to note for listeners, I'm always conscious of whenever it's me and another white person talking, like recognizing the voices that are being left out of the conversation. And as I was listening, I was thinking like, "Oh, it's funny that this conversation is sort of quote unquote novel for white people because we haven't had to really, I mean, yes, on different levels, but not to the extent that I think we are experiencing more oppressive systems than we have been since 2020 started.
Mm.
And so, I mean, I'm sure I am not the first white person to have this idea, but I do just want to honor the fact that literally for centuries people that are in the global majority, people of color, have been engaging in this type of resistance for way longer than we have ever thought about as white people. So I just want to acknowledge that that's there. So thanks for bringing that in.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it. So, Dr. Shawn Hondorp is a community builder, retreat host, and adventurer who's gradually forged her own path from an academic career as a board certified clinical psychologist. As the creator of the Innovative Therapist podcast and community, she helps therapists and helpers create the work that feels fully alive and authentic, blending psychology, creativity, and courageous self trust to inspire more sustainable, joyful ways of living and working. So please enjoy my convo with the amazing Shawn Hondorp. Hello, Shawn. Welcome to Conversations with a Wounded Healer.
Hi, Sarah. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to chat with you too. We met very briefly, I think, while I was like peeing my pants with laughter at the next level. Literally, I did pee myself. I'm not going to lie.
It
I'm
was,
of a certain
I almost
age.
did. I almost did because I was right next to you and it was so funny. Like, it was so good. And I feel bonded to you because of that
Oh, thank
experience.
you. Oh, thank you.
It was
Thank
so
you. It's
lovely.
so funny. And we told the full story. Kristen wins. It was on my other podcast, Group Practice Revolution. And
Oh,
so if you want
nice.
to hear the whole story about that event, you can go listen to that episode. But yeah, so I
Uh,
have a great laugh. I'm not going to lie and I'm not
you
going to
do.
hide it. I'm glad you
You,
enjoyed it.
I've watched that video more than once because Kristen posted it on Instagram. So you can also go to
Yeah.
Kristen's Instagram. Yeah,
I should pin that on my profile so that
you
people can
should.
go to it actually.
You
That's a great
should.
idea. I'll do that.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hi, let's talk about you instead of or we could just talk about my laugh for an hour. That might be entertaining as well. Who knows?
I would enjoy either, but yeah, I'm
Yeah,
here for
sure.
it.
Well, tell us. I'd love to start with people's therapist origin stories. Like,
Yeah.
what brought you to the field? How'd you get here?
It's like a winding path and it's not in the sense that pretty early on in undergrad, I was connected with a really great research mentor and professor. She did research at Michigan State, the biology and genetics of eating disorders. And I was like, I want to do this. And so I kind of got on the academic research path and went and got my PhD in clinical psych from Drexel with kind of the plan to be like an academic hospital medical center psychologist and then do a little clinical work on the side. Since then, I've been in solo private practice for 5 years. And I mean, really looking back, so much of this whole journey was like, how do I figure out ways to heal myself, heal my own eating disorder? I've been very open with that. Yeah. And in many ways, I think I'm still on this journey of like, what do I need and how does that intersect with what I'm doing and the things I'm building? So yeah, I'm on a very, I mean, in some ways, I'm on a similar path. So much of what I've learned has been so valuable to me. And I'm so grateful for my experiences in the research field and the medical settings and all the different things I've done, and I'm also really glad to be where I am now with a lot very different looking path than I thought I would have. So, I do have a strong specialty with eating disorders, although I would say that's not even my main specialty when I take new clients. I got trained in IFS last year, so I'm a IFS level 1 trained, person, and yeah, I've kinda gone very much off the beaten path with, very different from the CBT and ACT that I learned in grad school. I'll just say that.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I really think grad school needs to change the focus. Like, well, let me ask you this question because I like my wish for everybody who goes into this profession is that they realize that half the reason they're there is to heal themselves. Did
Mhm.
you have that awareness? Like when you went to grad school, where you're like, oh shit, I got to figure this eating disorder shit out.
That's such a good question. I think yes, and I hid it. Like, I think
Mhm.
I did know it at some level, but I also like my my goal in going to the research field, I was in a research lab that did eating disorders and weight loss, and so I was in this weird nuanced world where I was
Mhm.
learning things in the weight loss world that were like reinforcing my eating disorder. And
Yeah.
yeah, so a lot of my like early podcast days was like unpacking diet culture and health at every size and body liberation and all of that stuff. And I learned so much. Um, and yeah, so I think a little bit, I think I've just been more and more, less and less ashamed to admit it over time. And that's been really freeing. I think at some level I always knew, but I was like, I don't want anyone to know my research is me search is what we used to kind of
Right.
joke in grad school. Like, I didn't really want anyone to know that because I held so much shame about it.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I started my career in the addiction field, and
Mm.
it is so normalized in the addiction field for, like, you know, a therapist to come in and say, "Hi, I'm so and so. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and grateful alcoholic," or something like that, you know? And I've talked with other friends who've worked in the eating disorder industry about how, like, that is the last thing that would ever happen in the eating disorder community, and I'm curious if you have thoughts about why you think that might be.
Yeah, it is true. I've always thought about it as like a research versus clinical difference. Like my program, whereas I feel like in a social work program, my friends that did social work programs, like it's very normalized to go to therapy. Like we said on paper we should go to therapy, but like I once
Wow.
got like caught going to therapy on like the other side of campus and saw a professor and felt like really uncomfortable because she asked where I was going and she was like, "Oh, that's good for you," but like it felt like ah, like
Wow, that
so
sucks.
it was not ideal. It was not ideal at all. Yeah, so
Why wait,
I
why? Like, okay, could this so this what I'm, like, picking up here is this feels like family systems shit where we don't talk about, like, you know, don't talk about what goes on in the family outside of the family, and
mhm.
it's never an explicitly stated thing, but that's just a thing that you feel, like, is that how it was for you?
I don't know, maybe. Yeah, maybe, and I think it was also like, my professor in grad school was my research mentor was not the one I ran into. They both were great in their own ways. I actually had a really positive grad school experience. He was like the a lot older. He's still doing research. He is like the quintessential, like, kinda absent-minded professor, but so caring, but, like, also so deeply uncomfortable. Like, when I had a big breakup the first year of grad school, and he was like, go home," like, and I was
Mm,
like, "Oh," like, it felt like
wow.
a little confusing to unpack, and again, he was not doing any clinical work. Yeah, it was just confusing to and I went straight through from undergrad, like, so I was pretty young in grad school and just, like I think I was just, like, confused by all of it, like, "Wait, we're trying to, like, help people, but we're not really" most of us are doing having our own protective mechanisms against this stuff, and so I don't know if that answers your question, but I do think, and now as I continue to do my own work and unpack my own, like, family of origin stuff, it's like, it's not that I guess it was not that different, where it's like, this stuff is probably does kinda mirror some of my family systems where there's some harmful stuff that we don't fully name and we don't fully know until we know that, "Oh, this is gaslighting," or, "This is veiled criticism." So, I think there are some parallels.
Yeah, like, honestly, it just I mean, I know that this is a thing, and I mean, when I went to grad school, there was definitely no talk of, you know, doing your own work I mean, some professors probably did, but that was definitely not the vibe of the whole program, and it
Mm,
honestly just, like, shocks me, and especially to hear that you almost got the other message that, like, "Oh, there's something wrong with you if you're going to therapy." Like, that's terribly problematic, and no wonder therapists are in the state that we're in right now if we haven't centered on our own healing.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I actually was listening to your podcast, so I know how old you are. I'm 40, and I don't know how much it's changed. Like, I'd actually be really curious to talk to,
Yeah,
like, current people in that program. And I will say on paper, they said to go. Well,
right.
they said it was okay in theory to go. But that was not really the actual experience that most of us felt, I would say, or at
Right,
least I didn't. Yeah.
right. And when was your first experience with therapy? Was it before going to grad school or
Yeah, I did a little in undergrad, and that was when I first was, like, struggling with I guess, the eating disorder started before undergrad, actually. Yeah, I did a little, but nothing significant. Yeah,
Hmm,
nothing substantial. I didn't really experience beneficial therapy till more recently in my life. A lot of my eating disorder I figured out on my own, like, I read intuitive eating, and I it was, like, a lot of
mm,
self-help strategies.
mhm. And for people who aren't that, like, self-motivated, because there can be a lot of ambivalence with any sort of addiction. I put eating disorders in its own, like, process addiction sort of category, and so without that, like, relational support. It's pretty incredible that you figured it out on your own.
Yeah, I think I have appreciate that. I have appreciation now for those parts of me that were like in some ways I'm just very very committed to my own healing and figuring out my own process. And really didn't believe that I could get support. Like it's like I almost just was
Mm,
like, the world's no one can actually help me. I got to figure it out. And so I have these
mm,
pretty fierce protective parts that push that. So, yeah,
interesting.
appreciate that affirmation from you. They appreciate
Yeah.
that part of me appreciates it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I'm curious too, because I really identify as somebody who absolutely, there's always been this part of me alive that, like, is so tenacious about my own healing journey. Do you feel like that's always been a part of you, or did that wake up at some point?
I think at some level it's always been there. Yeah, I think, yeah, I would say it's been there and and then, as time went on and like it's interesting. I grew up without a lot of, like, access to, like, the internet and all these different, like, online resources and podcasts and things, although I was an early podcast adopter. I was listening to podcasts
Mm.
in 2009, like, walking around. I'd put, like, podcasts onto my little mini iPod and, like, walk
Yes.
around Philly and, like, listen to 'em, and it was these, like, kinda fringe, kinda weird like, therapy, relationship with food podcasts that were, like, doing, like, emotional freedom techniques and stuff that, like, was totally my grad school people would be like, "What?
Right?
That is not evidence-based."
Energy
Like,
psychology, but that one actually is. That's like EMDR and EFT are the 2 that are most researched energy psychology methods.
oh, I know, but in my
Yeah.
program, they would have been
Oh,
like,
yeah.
"That is not that is it's exposure therapy with" anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, yeah, no, it is. I do know that now. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I was my first podcast that I listened to was Reagan Fox. He is
Mm, I
this
don't know
I
that one.
think he ended up being on Big Brother at some point, like, I don't even know what he's doing these days, I'm gonna have to look him up, but yeah, I remember downloading episodes, putting them on my iPod or whatever iPod alternative I had, and, yeah, going to grad school on the train, listening to Reagan Fox.
Mm, love that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was so grateful, right, to have these, like, new and different I don't even know how popular the podcast it was, like, Renee Stevens, Inside Out Weight Loss, like, it was just some lady who was, like, really open with her own story, she wasn't a therapist, she was just someone
Mhm.
sharing her experience, it was generous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now you have done the same.
Yeah, it was part of what I was like, I guess I'll just" even though so much of my conditioning was like, "Don't share your stuff as a therapist, what if it makes your clients uncomfortable?" But yeah, I think it was 2021 that I was just like, if it helps one person feel less shame and less alone like I did, like, worth it." And then I got, like, this added benefit for me of, like, I healed another level of it. Even though I had, like, felt pretty healed up with my relationship with food, like, it was such a gift to me as well.
Yeah. I've felt that with this whole podcast. It's sort of been my experience of like it's almost like a diary. Like if I'm sure
Mhm.
that if I went back and listened to certain episodes like more at the beginning of the podcast, I could totally track like where I was in my specific trauma healing journey place. Even if
Mhm.
I whether I was saying it out loud to listeners or not, I'm sure like I can hear it within myself. And I think that's like it's a cool archive to have for yourself.
I totally agree. I literally just went back and listened to an episode from 2022 about a year in, and I felt the exact same way. So, yeah, it was like it was also I heard how much joy I had in it, even though I was really burnt out at that time. So, it was like a
Mhm.
reminder of, like, this has been something that has been sustaining to me, even though I was burnt out in other ways. So, yeah, and
Yeah.
yeah, pretty cool.
Well, what are you passionate about right now as related to the therapy field?
Yeah, I am super passionate about like you, therapists doing their own work, but I'm very passionate about exploring creativity. And really do think creativity can look like a lot of different things. I think of creativity as like really just authentic expression, exploring desires, and just that level of like body trust of like there's something in me that wants to do this thing, or take this trip or explore this class and what it can awaken inside of us. There's a quote by Howard Thurman that I've been obsessed with for many years that's like, "Don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive and go do that because the world needs people that come alive." So that's what I'm obsessed with right now
Mhm,
and have been
mhm.
for a while now.
And as you're talking about that, I'm thinking about what keeps people from their creativity, and I have some ideas, but I'm curious if anything's come up as you've been exploring this topic.
Yeah, lots of therapists. So I do some in-person meetups, just kind of informal, and a lot of them are like, "Shawn, I'm not creative. I just wanted to hang out with some cool people." Like a lot of them don't think they're creative because they think of creativity as like someone
Mhm.
who writes a book or, this idea of creativity. So some of it's just I'm not a creative person, and that's not true. We are all creative beings. We are wired to create. And I'm someone who would have said I'm not a creative person, so I can relate to it. Um, and then I think there's lots of different protector parts in IFS language that whether that's perfectionism or inner critics or just different parts that have learned to shut down because often these creative parts are connected to these younger parts of ourselves that had to be shoved down. And so i I am always working with my protector parts as I continue on most of my a lot of my creative journey. It's not the only thing that I've explored creatively, but a lot of it's been re-engaging with dance as an adult. And
Mm.
it's been wonderfully, like, one of the most healing things for me, but every next level of creativity, like choreographing a duet with a friend and then choreographing a solo and then choreographing a group dance, and all these parts, like, my critic mostly is like, "What the fuck are you doing?" Like, "This
Mhm.
is a mistake." Like, "You need to go back and hide yourself, and this was a bad plan." So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm also thinking, like, creativity does not conform. And I'm thinking a lot about systems these days because of the fucked up world that we're living in, and specifically this period of time.
Yes.
And if historically people had really been encouraged to be in touch with their creativity, they wouldn't have been as controllable.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering if now, because we have all of this technology available, like literally anybody can have a podcast, which sometimes that's great and sometimes that's terrible for many different reasons, right? But it's less controllable, right? I think it's been harder to pinpoint what quote unquote truth is because there are so many diverse voices with diverse thoughts and different agendas and all that sort of thing, and so I
Mhm.
think that, I mean, I'm really thinking about my own, very, and maybe this is a little, hyperbolic, but, like, puritanical upbringing in regards to, like, how you should fit in, how you should look, how you should act, how you should speak, what you should and shouldn't say, and, like, the size of your body, right? Like, all of these different ways that, like, I know that my mom didn't necessarily wanna control me in that sense, but she felt controlled by the systems around her, whether it's the church or patriarchy or right, whatever it is, and then that just gets kind of passed down, and I feel like we're at a really unique time in history where we can begin to take off that, like, oppression in some way.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Which is a beautiful thing, and what does it bring up in people that have a lot of protection around that, right? Or that feels deeply unsafe or, threatens these systems. And so, yeah, I think I don't have, like, a lot of fully formed thoughts about it yet, but I feel like the
They
more
don't
I
have to be
go.
fully formed, just blah.
Great. Well, yeah, it's like this idea of like art and creativity as promotion of social change. I've had some experiences because I have a dance like community and we've created shows and I'm not in charge of those shows and there's a very, social change oriented message. But I think it's really interesting to think about how art can communicate what words can't, and whether that's, I mean, dance
Mhm.
or visual art or and like how do we I think it's been really interesting to think about like how do we as therapists work alongside artists or become artists to maybe help create community spaces that actually promote dehuman or like, you know, humanization, not the opposite of dehumanization or like connection
Right.
and belonging. Um, it's been really interesting to think about like how we can be innovative. And I think the more we engage with creativity and play, the more we can bring that innovative mindset to whatever the heck we choose to do in a work capacity or in a community building social change capacity.
Yeah, I think therapists are artists because there's
Mhm.
of course the science piece of it, but there's I mean every time I teach a class, I always remind students like you can get the science of therapy through books. I'm here to teach you the art. I'm here to
Mhm.
teach you how to tap into your intuition so that you can
Mhm.
better see the person in front of you more clearly like beyond your own filters and the filters of all the oppressive systems that we have. So there's that piece, and there's also like liberation of self. You can just dance for your own sake, like, your own mental like, it doesn't even have to be sure, we can, use art for particular social change, but if you allow yourself to dance alone in your bedroom, I can guarantee you that is not an isolated act. That act of liberation for yourself is impacting the energy in the space around you, in your community, and it ripples out because when you feel free, other people oftentimes I get feedback, people are scared shitless about when they meet people who feel free, but the more of us that do it, the more of
Mhm.
us who see that it's possible.
Totally. Yeah. No, I completely agree. The one of the my new things that I've been doing is slowly building an online community, very slowly, very small. And we
Yeah.
had a meeting. We have like a co-working meeting every Monday morning, and we do whatever we check in, and then we have like 30 minutes where we do whatever we want to do, and it could be like I'm getting stuff done that I need to, but for me, I did move around this office space and dance just on my own for no purpose except to just move and feel a little bit like free. And there was no outcome. There was no like, and it's interesting because I've, like many of us, like a long history of perfectionism and overworking and like, okay, what am I going to make with this? Right. Like, how am I going to use my creativity for social good? But I've learned, I think, to like mostly strike this balance. I mean, it's imperfect, of course, but like of just like, sometimes I'm just gonna dance and I'm not gonna create anything and it's just but I am creating something and that's exactly what you're saying, and I it loosens it makes me more like I did that before. I did that between a session today too for like 2
Mm,
minutes, and I'm
that's
doing it more and
lovely.
more because it really helps.
Right. And everybody has their own entry point. Like dancing is definitely not my thing. Singing is my thing.
Mm,
And
mhm.
laughing is obviously my thing.
Yeah.
And I'm curious because I've been talking to some friends about fear and our relationship with fear. Like what is it like and it doesn't have to necessarily be around creativity. Maybe we take this a different direction or maybe it's from the same topic, but like what is your relationship like with fear?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, for a long time, kinda going back to what we were referencing earlier, I think that I've had parts of me that push me really hard to do things even if I'm scared and just push through, and I consider myself like, I think one of my top values as a leader, I've been doing different values reflection exercises, and I think even as we have to, like, really narrow down, because I was listening to a Brené Brown podcast with Adam Grant, and they were saying, like, narrow it down to 2, and courage is one
Mhm.
of my, top ones, and I think I've had a part of me that just muscles through and pushes through to do things even if I'm completely terrified, and that served me to a point, but now I'm learning to do it in a way that's maybe not so just do all the things. Like, even if you're
Yeah.
terrified, it's listening to my body. So I think my relationship to it has been to slow down a little bit and make sure things are actually aligned before I jump into things that terrify me. It's interesting too because I think I've gotten this feedback that, like, you're just doing all these creative things and, like, you make it look like it's really not hard. I'm like, "Well, it is hard. I don't do it all at once, first of all, and I, like, pause things and then I do other things." Like, I'm not doing, like, and yeah, they've sort of said, like, I guess I sometimes forget that for me, like, I'm just used to pushing through, and for me, it's almost like
Mhm.
giving myself permission, like, "You actually don't have to do this." Like, I'm thinking about choreographing a group dance in May, and I'll probably do it because 'cause I'm me, but I keep being like, "I You don't have to," and I might not, right? I actually might
Mhm.
give myself permission to not, and so, I don't know if that answers your question. I think it's an interesting, like, idea of, like, how do we more broadly look at fear because there's a lot of uncertainty in the world and
Mhm.
lots of reasons to experience fear lately.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder, I'm totally making this up. I wonder if it feels like almost everything is on a spectrum and different polarities, right? And there are those of us who some might say we're fearless, even though like you, my internal experience is definitely like, oh no, no, no. I am very afraid sometimes, but fear has never stopped me from doing anything. And then there are people on the other side where they're like, any sign of fear, they're like, well, clearly I'm not supposed to do that. And whatever side of the spectrum you're on, health is somewhere probably in the middle. And for us, at least even being like the behavior can be the exact same, right? Like somebody who is full of fear and it stops them, and somebody who is, has a push through relationship with fear can end up having the same behavior at the end of the day. But it's really like the internal process of, I have awareness that this fear is present. I am going to
Mhm,
acknowledge that it's here and acknowledge that I have a choice about what I end up doing with this fear rather than
mhm,
either just sticking your head in the sand or, pushing your body beyond your limits.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I think that acknowledgement of choice and that feeling of choice and autonomy and agency
Mhm.
feels like the very important piece to me.
Yeah. And I don't know about your vantage point with other therapists right now, but I see a lot of therapists feeling like they don't have agency. Or maybe let me correct myself. I don't know what their internal experience is, but the external experience seems to be really letting fear get in the way of um, feeling safe in the world. And obviously, there's a ton of shit going on out there. So it's not like, yeah, sure, I can feel totally fine in Trump's America. But um, I actually do feel fine, and I do have an immense amount of privilege, so I will name that, but also it's because I I know I have cultivated a lot of fucking capacity, and I have cultivated a lot of tools, and I have a lot of plans in place
Mhm,
in case, our system implodes. And I guess I wonder if we're not, as therapists, really internally focused on our own experience, how the hell are we gonna get through this time?
mhm. Yeah, that's really interesting that you say all of that because I think we're aligned and we're just discovering it as we talk, but
Mhm.
I've felt less apologetic about it as time went on, but I used to be, like, apologetic, like, the world is on fire, like, and I feel like I'm doing pretty good, and I almost feel, like, guilty about that or,
Yeah.
like, ashamed to say that or afraid to say that because what if like, I also have a lot of privilege, and that's for sure a part of it, and also, I had a lot of privilege 5 years ago, and I internally was, like, sort of a
Yeah.
really fight or flight state of stress, and so
Yes. Yes.
and, 5 years before that in a different way, and so it's like there is the shift, and I for me, because it's been I mean, it's been multiple things. It's been finding the right healing tools for me. It's been following I call them like creative urges, like following these
Mhm.
urges to like go on a little retreat in Traverse City and then be like, maybe one day I'll do this. And then I'm like, maybe I'll do this. And I put it out there to one person and she's like, I would go. And so I like host my first retreat and I'm starting to like do these things work wise. But then behind the scenes, I'm also like following these breadcrumbs with dance. And I do think this like creativity and playful mindset and getting back in touch with things that make me feel alive, like, I do think it's part of that, things feeling pretty good even though we can acknowledge there's a lot of shit going on.
Yeah. That's so interesting that, like, you and I seem to have a very similar trajectory with the same time. I would love to see our astrology synastry,
Yeah,
to
I
see
don't
if we
know a
get
lot
some
about
transits.
I don't know a lot about astrology, but I had a friend that got me into human design, so I'm but I don't know how it maps onto what the
Yeah, I
planets are
only
doing.
know enough about astrology to be dangerous, but, like, when I hear, like, timing line up with other people, I'm like, "Oh, what are we sharing that might be." Yeah,
Yeah.
because I would say that too, like, and I love that you named that, like, you have the exact same amount of privilege today as you had 5 years ago, but today you feel more, agency? Would that be the right way to put it?
Yes. Yeah, agency and I also just think of it as, like, alignment, but I think agency I think I'm someone who, um, has been obsessed with the concept of autonomy for years. That was what my early podcast name was, like, Motivation Made Easy, all centered around a theory of motivation that was really into autonomy. So yeah, agency, but also, like, alignment. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk about those 2 different things, because they go together, but also are separate.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think of agency, very wrapped up into this, like, I exist at choice, like, I have choices, I've always been someone who kind of, like, reminds myself of choices, even if they're, like, kind of feeling ridiculous, like, when I
Yeah.
was in the healthcare system, I was like, I feel pretty I really don't like doing all of these, like, pre-surgical bariatric evaluations." I liked working with that population of humans, but I did not like pre-surg evals, and just being like, "Okay, do your best to muscle through, but if it gets really bad, you can go into private practice or like this is kind of embarrassing to say, but this is what popped in my head. You can be a beach body coach, which is totally anti-diet, like not at all what
Yeah,
I subscribe to. But like,
yeah.
I don't know, I was doing some Ashanti's workouts and I was enjoying them at the time. But just giving, and I think a lot of my friends in grad school, they'd be like, all right, just make it to your master's or like, if this doesn't work out, we can open up a smoothie shop together, like always dreaming about alternatives and like reminding yourself you have choice so that you don't feel so stuck. I think that's the agency side of it for sure
Mhm, mhm.
for me.
And just to unpack that a little bit, I'm just sort of, like, musing as you talk about this because I want everybody to have access to the same choices, and they don't because
Mhm.
of privilege, right? And
Mhm.
so, I mean, yeah, this is a way bigger question than I can even unpack right now, but, like,
Yeah.
go ahead, what were you gonna say?
Well, one thing I'll add that I heard the other day, so I've been like this theory of motivation is called self-determination theory and it's really pretty like complex in a sense, but there I was reading a book by an industrial organizational psychologist, her Tasha Urich, who wrote a book called Shatterproof, and she was talking about these concepts of like autonomy. There's like 3 key psychological needs. I used to talk about this a lot that we all need to like thrive in our life, and
Mhm,
it's autonomy, so freedom of choice, competence, like feeling effective, and then relatedness or a sense of belonging. And what I thought was really interesting was she was talking about ways that what they've studied, and I don't remember the exact details, but I can get it to you if you're a research nerd like me, but, they've studied autonomy, and even within really oppressive systems that we're all impacted by, there are ways that, I'm forgetting the exact name of it right now, where we can get some of these like needs for autonomy met that
Mhm.
actually help us to feel a lot of freedom within systems that are still oppressive. Because I mean, we still, even though sometimes I'm like, I'm in private practice and I work for myself, I have so much freedom. I almost feel like, again, guilt about that. But it was a really interesting way to look at the way that we can help people feel some agency
Yeah.
within systems and realities. We're not lying to them, but we're helping them to be like within, even if it's like you don't have control over, you know, 80% of your choices, but you have this like 20% where you can have some agency and control. It really helped their psychological well being and their mood, basically. So
Mhm.
I wish I could remember more of the details, but yeah.
Yeah, when I'm thinking of resilience and like what part of it is asking people to adapt to circumstances that are not good for them, and what part
Mhm.
is activating their own agency about when they can push back against systems that are oppressive. Like I'm
Yeah.
thinking about this too in the realm of group practice because there's always discussions on the Facebook groups about like, practice owners being terrible people. And, one of the things right now I'm like the balance of needing to maintain a viable organization and people having their basic needs met, right? Because now the insurance premiums have gone up. They've gone up for practice owners and they've gone up for individuals. And whose responsibility is it to bridge that gap? And that is a, like, philosophical, political question that w small business practice owners can't answer. Like, I can't tell you if it's the practice owner's responsibility or the individual's. It's truly a bigger system responsibility, but we don't have
Mhm.
that right now, at least for the next 3 years. So, in
Mhm.
absence of that, right, where do we find that agency and choice? And if in these, like, micro oppressive system and I realize I am naming something that is still a very privileged thing, but it's my world that I'm in.
Mhm.
Um, if we are fighting each other rather than looking at the bigger systems at play and the people who really do have the power to make this change, we're keeping ourselves locked in a battle that we're not paying attention to the man behind the curtain.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I think you see that IFS helped me give me language to this later on, but even in the weight loss and eating disorder world, there's a lot of fighting within the fields and, so much of it I was kind of someone who was like, I kinda can see both sides in a
Mhm,
sense, or, we can still name the harmful aspects that are going on while saying, like, there's a lot many of us want the same things, and I think IFS helped me understand, like, there's these polarized parts fighting with these polarized parts, and then you add a little internet and social media, and it's just we kind of are all convinced that everyone has these, 10% views, but really, like, so many of us do see things pretty similarly, and so it's
mhm,
yeah, how do we figure out how to help people see those systems and without I don't know, and get into some collaborative
mhm.
discussions that actually lead somewhere. It's a challenge.
I feel pretty confident that as a collective, we are at the very beginning point of resistance. And I don't know exactly what shape that's going to take, but it feels like, and we're recording this in December 2025, no idea yet when this is going to come out, but it feels like something has just shifted in the last month where the the fight is finally alive where it hasn't been alive for most of 2025, at least from my perspective. And so I am hopeful that the fight that's happening in the larger collective then ends up trickling down into our field as well. Because there's so much within our field that, just like you said, the training program that you went through, like, wouldn't it be amazing if really, like, in every class it was reiterated, like, not only do we, think that you can go to therapy, but you should, because that's
Mm.
an ethical imperative that we have.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I will say I gave a talk to pre-doc interns, locally here the other day, and I was very encouraged by a couple of things that some of them shared with me. I was like,
Oh,
"Oh, okay." They were, like, exploring creativity because I was, like, bringing all of my creativity to them. I'm like, "This'll be totally new. It'll blow their mind." She was like, "We did a lot of this in grad school," which I was really pleased with. Like, it was,
yeah.
not she wasn't dismissive of it, right? But it was I
Mhm.
was like, "Ooh, okay. That's exciting." And it was a doctoral level program somewhere, but I think it was counseling psych.
That's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
Well, we're moving towards the end of our time, and I have to ask the questions that I always ask everyone, but would you consider yourself a healer?
Yeah, I would more consider myself someone who heals myself and shows up in a
Mhm.
space with someone else, to hopefully facilitate the conditions that give them the best chance to tap into their own intuition and move towards healing, but I think they're the one doing the healing, not me.
Mhm. Mhm. And how about wounded healer? How do you feel about that?
So, I don't love the idea of I mean, I like it and I don't because I think it's accurate that, like, wounding happens, right? Actually, I had a friend the other day, it was so meaningful to me, 'cause something happened with my personal therapist that felt wounding to me, and he was like,
Mm.
"I believe you." You didn't even know the details. He was like, "She
Aw.
wounded you. I believe you." And I was like, that I, like, will never forget that because I was just like, "Oh, maybe it wasn't, like, that bad, and maybe I'm making a big deal about it," doing my own, like, self-gaslighting stuff, and so I am wounded by different things, but I definitely don't think of myself as wounded in the sense of the permanency of it, and, so sometimes, yeah, it 'cause I think of myself as someone, like, with a history of an eating disorder. I don't think of myself as someone with, like, an active eating disorder. Of course, I have other things I'm actively dealing with, but, um, yeah, so that's my general answer to that question.
Mhm. And I love, like, having asked this question, like, over 300 times now and getting the answers, I l I love and I'm also frustrated by the fact that we can say the same words and mean different things by them. And this is part of why I think we're having such challenge communicating with other human adults in this time period because it feels like there's more of a desire to be seen and understood clearly, and there seem to be more interpretation of the same words than ever before. I don't know if that's true, but it's so interesting to think about, yeah, just how language evolves, how our expectations of being met evolve. Yeah, there's no question in there, but
Mhm.
any comments?
Well, I'll just say that one of my creative things is trying to learn Spanish as an adult, and it's
Hmm.
my Spanish is very bad, so I'll not be showing it to you, but, I am I'm trying
Wait,
very
I almost spoke French there. I was gonna say très mal, but that's French. That's not Spanish. So my Spanish is also bad.
no es muy bueno.
There you go.
Um, but yeah, I think it's interesting because when I try to use my, like, rudimentary Spanish with people, I think there's almost more grace that we give when we're not, like,
Mm,
I'm always because I love deep conversations, so I like, when I went to Costa Rica with my daughter in April, I was, like, so frustrated because I was like, "My Spanish is bad, hers is much better than mine." She's 8.
funny.
But she like, I wasn't able to have, like, the deep talks that I want to be able to have,
Mhm,
but also you're not, like, expected you're not gonna overthink, you're gonna be like, "Oh, yeah, I generally get what you mean, moving on." Like, it's
mhm.
almost like, so that's what I thought of when you were talking, and it's like, I don't know. Yeah, I do think there's, like, almost an maybe overthinking, overanalyzing. I mean, we're a very cognitive based my training was very cognitive based, right?
Mhm.
Less intuitive body, like, okay, we get really caught up in words.
Yeah. Yeah. Grace is the word. Like, and I keep hearing that, especially in terms of thinking about like the political realm, having grace for one another, because I've seen the studies too that essentially say that like we're more alike than we think we are just because of what we're seeing online. And I've had a real awakening of that experience this year with therapists because I've after COVID, I was like, "Ooh, I like it at home. I'm not leaving." And I just like stay at home all the time and think that like what I see on Facebook is what everybody's thinking and feeling. And then at some point I was like, I guess I should leave the house again and started going to like networking things. And every time I went to a networking thing and we were talking about like what we are seeing and experiencing, we're on the same page. And I'm like, oh, maybe what I'm seeing on Facebook is not the whole truth. And people aren't quite as angry. I mean, I'm sure plenty of people are angry. Or maybe
Mhm.
people are, I don't know, just expressing it out on Facebook. But
Mhm.
yeah, I want to believe, and if I'm using my intuition, maybe not always, but I'm gonna say at least 80% of the time, I can probably tell when somebody is a terrible person and when they're just, like, just not the best version of themselves that they would wanna be, and I can have grace
Mhm.
for it, and I can
Mhm.
protect myself by, having good enough boundaries to not overextend myself until I know that this is a safe relationship for me to really give
Mhm.
of myself. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm hoping that therapists can be models in that way for the rest of humans.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see as we all kind of like make contact more and more with like how online and social media is. I mean, we've been knowing for a while that it's harmful, but like what it's really doing to
Yeah.
the podcast I listened to was like Dr. Todd Rose talking about collective illusions, and it's like
Mm,
it seemed like I don't know, I didn't go into the research of how they looked at these private opinions, but it felt really optimistic, and I tend to, like, be an optimistic person of, like, yeah, how do we actually,
mhm,
as therapists, maybe lead the charge a little bit and saying, like, how do we get offline and get I don't know, to me, it feels like offline is the answer, but maybe there's some sophisticated ways to do it online too, um, to really help people to see the coming together and yeah.
mhm.
My creativity obsessed part is like, I wonder if art will be part of it and
Yeah,
what that'll look like or humor or who knows, I'm not sure, but, like, what that'll look like. How do we connect back to each other?
yeah. I love that. Well, Sean, where do people find you if they wanna connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm not on social media a ton, but I am on Instagram at The Innovative Therapist, and then my website is drshawnhondorp.com, and I have a podcast, the Innovative Therapist Podcast as well, which I almost stopped, but I love it so much and I decided to keep it going. And so it is still coming out with episodes like every 2 weeks or so, so they can find me there as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. I'm glad we got to spend time together, and we get to
Yeah.
spend more time together because I'm gonna be on your podcast too.
Yay! I know. I am very excited for that. Oh, and I guess this is the part of me that's just wanting to be thorough. I do have like a free zone of genius. I didn't talk about zone of genius, but like when we talk about work that makes you come alive, I have a free like clarify your zone of genius guide for anyone that's interested in that. I can give you the link. I need to get a better link. It's kind of long. So I can send that link to you, Sarah, and you can include
Yeah,
it in
put it
the
in the
show
show
notes
notes.
or they can look at my website and check it out because it helps to just be like, what is this for me? How do I start to do this? And so it'll walk you through some questions you can ask yourself. So
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you too. It was really fun. Thank you for such
Yay!
good questions.